How much do you know about the way your representative in the European Parliament actually votes when it comes to issues like climate change, financial reform, or anti-terror legislation? Well, a new survey carried out by the web-based Vote Watch has been studying the voting patterns of MEPs for the last 6 months, and they've come up with some pretty interesting findings. In the European Parliament, votes are won by building consensus across political blocs. Most MEPs belong not just to national delegations, but they sit with larger European political party groupings. When voting, MEPs are expected to follow their group line, but national parties and governments may demand a different loyalty. The Vote Watch study suggests it's not national allegiances, but European parties that are winning out.
And what people expected was once the Parliament really got real legislative power, once votes in the Parliament mattered, the MEPs would come under so much national pressure that these party coalitions would break down. In fact, we've seen the opposite. The more power the Parliament has got, the more there's been voting on party lines. And how we as political scientists understand this is to say, there's more, once there's more power, there's more things at stake, there's more of an incentive to organise.
Well, to make sense of some of the findings of this report, I'm joined by two members of the European Parliament, Edward McMillan-Scott, who's currently appealing against his expulsion from the British Conservatives, but is a Vice President of the European Parliament, an independent at the moment. We also have Wolf Klinz, who is the chairman of the special committee set up to deal with the economic and social crisis, and of course also a Liberal from Germany. Edward McMillan-Scott, can I ask you first of all, did anything sort of jump out at you from this survey? It's got a number of findings.
Well, it's very early days because, of course, we've now got the Lisbon Treaty, so I think that the European Parliament is going to change quite considerably over the next few years. But looking back over the first 6 months of this Parliament, not surprising, I think, to us, because we know well how it works, the fact that MEPs tend to vote on political lines, not national lines, is, I think, quite an important finding. And that on issues like the environment, there are quite substantial divisions, because we know that within parties there are strongly held views, for example, on climate change.
So that's becoming more political.
It's a more political institution, clearly.
But I mean, I think that voters might sort of say, oh, aren't they fighting for national interests? Why are they voting with, for example, in your case, the Liberals from Spain, rather than for, the German car industry?
Well, you shouldn't forget that, after all, we are politicians and we have strong basic political beliefs. And those are beliefs that our party stands for. And of course, that's why we have assembled, grouped ourselves together in in the ALDE political group, or in the, independent or ECR, whatever. And therefore, I'm not too surprised to see that we really do vote, not 100%, but to a very large majority, on the basis of our basic political beliefs. Now, we have three loyalties, really, as MEPs. We are responsible for our country, sure, and we certainly, when it really gets tough, so to speak, we also are quite willing to defend the interests of our
So just give me an example where you voted for the national interest rather than the group.
Well, the car industry is an example, for instance, and the British colleagues, of course, are interested in defending the interests of the City of London, irrespective which political group they belong to.
Is that true for you, Edward? Where would you put the national interest?
I mean, what's interesting is just behind me now, there's a meeting going on which Wolf is not attending, which is the German Liberals, the CDU and the CSU. They're a coalition in Germany. So here in the European Parliament they have a political caucus, which is, again, a political mechanism. This is becoming a more political place, but as Wolf rightly says, when there's a national interest, for example, the City of London is under some attack at the moment, or parts of it, there'll be a natural tendency of the British members to work together. But obviously, we're talking here about a European Parliament which operates by consensus. And I think that's right. In the way of making laws for 500 million people, you can't operate on the basis of a national parliament which is more confrontational, especially Westminster, which is really two sides of an argument. Here, we try and work together, which makes it actually a rather dull place. The leader of the Socialist Group said yesterday, when we were voting on the Commission, his remarks were, I love a fight, a political fight. We all do. But actually here, we try and find agreement.
And interestingly, your personal example, deciding not to go with the British Conservatives and follow that national kind of movement, but to stay, within a sort of environment where there's more consensus building is an example of that sort of belief.
My reasons for not joining the new Tory grouping were to do with the nature of some of the people within it, who
Yes.
I, as you know, take great issue with. But there's a case in point where a new group might have been shown to have some influence within the European Parliament. There's no evidence so far that the new ECR has any influence on anything at all.
And that's very different for, say, the Liberal group, who, according to this survey, are on the winning side more often than anybody else. And that's not because of your numbers, is it? Why do you think that is?
No, it's not because of our numbers. It's simply due to the fact that depending upon which area we're talking about, we find allies either in the conservative side or sometimes even the socialist or green side. For instance, on economic matters, financial industry matters, etc., we most often do vote together with the conservatives. When it comes to defending civil liberties, defending the environment, defending also the European case against maybe USA in some disputes, we tend to find natural allies on the left, as it were.
I can tell you a secret, actually. When I'm chairing a vote, if it's a difficult one, if all the Liberals vote together one way, then normally the vote's gone that way. If they're split, as they very often are.
I wanted to come back to one thing that you just said. I don't think necessarily that our meetings here are dull. We are not so confrontational. That's quite clear, because we cannot consider ourselves to be members of the governing party or the opposition party. That doesn't exist here. But what I find quite interesting is that we have to make an effort to win majorities each and every time anew. And that is quite challenging sometimes.
I mean, we're talking about sort of political alliances within the Parliament, but actually that's going beyond the Parliament as well, isn't it? We're seeing sort of European political families cooperating, sort of leaders and MEPs as well.
We just had our first meeting, in which I'm sitting on a committee, a steering group, to look at the way that the European Parliament works with national parliaments to put Lisbon into practice. Because in fact it's become a more parliamentary Europe now. The ministers of our respective families are meeting together before meetings of the Council now. The EPP and the Socialists, certainly, and the Liberals will be thinking about this too. And this is a sort of caucus before a meeting. So now you've got the Council becoming more political, the political groups at a European level becoming more active. In the European Parliament, that's reflected. It's becoming a more political Europe, certainly.
Yes.
Where does that leave the British Conservatives in their little group?
You better ask that.
Okay, well, we will ask them. But on that note, thank you very much, both of you. And that's all from me and my guests here at the European Parliament in Strasbourg. Hope to see you next time. Bye for now.